What the hell is this? The moment I saw what was inside the box, I instantly felt the blood rush away from my face, and my heart began to pound. I quickly closed the box, marched into the kitchen, and threw the whole present in the trash, box and all.
What are you doing? You can't throw away my son's present.
Mr. Spencer, please have a look at what's inside. At my words, my concerned father-in-law picked up the little black box from the trash, eyed it for some time, and then opened it up. His face turned bright red with fury.
You gosh damn bastard! How frickin' dare you do this to her?
This is the story of how my husband, a kind, long man once upon a time, gradually declined in terms of humanity and common sense, and how an unalterable occurrence caused him to do something that would ultimately render his life a veritable masterpiece of misery. My name is Danny Spencer, and I'm a 28-year-old housewife. I've been married to my husband Lee for 4 years. I initially met him 5 years ago at the company I worked for before. He originally worked in a different department, but was eventually transferred to the department where I worked at that time. Being on the road to becoming a successful officewoman myself, I volunteered to teach him how to do the job. It really helped that he already had some knowledge of the company and its systems, and within a week, he was doing everything very well. Another reason why I volunteered to help him, and why I had to fight hard to be given that responsibility, was also because I found him attractive. He had a face that looked as though he was of Chinese descent, and because of his name, I was certain he was. He had a very charming personality, and above all else, he made my cheeks hurt with how much he made me smile. I don't know what it was exactly, but something about his language and his tone didn't make me laugh per se, unless it was genuinely funny. But it just sounded nice, and I wanted to talk with him all day long, if that was possible. Perhaps my help really came off as a good impression, because about a month after we started working together, he confessed he had feelings for me. He asked me out on a nice dinner, and I immediately accepted. Things snowballed, and just 1 year later, we were married. Quick jump into the realm of the betrothed, I know, but I thought I would be happy with him for all my life.
My income alone will be enough to live on. I want you to stay at home and take care of it, if you don't mind.
Per Lee's request, I chose to retire from my job and become a housewife, and so began my new life as a newlywed. I was happy for a while, but there was one thing that bothered me. That was my relationship with Whitney, my mother-in-law. To be honest, from the moment I went to greet her at the wedding, I was worried that I wouldn't be able to get along with her. She looked at me with such a raw feeling of resentful coldness that was really quite something. Since Lee was an only child, I could only imagine Whitney must have felt frustrated that her only son, her only child, would be taken away from her. I couldn't really blame her for that, but I could tell from her every word that she was extremely protective of her son. And my fears of what would happen later on, after I got accustomed to marriage, proved to be right. Whitney would often come to our house and say things along the lines of, "The way you fold your laundry is wrong. It's not the same as mine. Redo all of them right now." And then she would scatter all the laundry all over the floor. But why? Another time along the lines of, "What the hell is up with this excuse of an omelet? Throw it away and make another one. It doesn't taste like ours. It's not at all like the salty taste my son likes." Oh no. And she never even tasted it. In a nutshell, Whitney would say that everything I did was not right at all, and she would say something to criticize my housework every time she visited the house. This happened many, many times during the first few months of marriage, and every time I came was with my mother-in-law. She became more and more difficult to deal with. Looking back now, I do realize that I should have been stronger against her at the time. I should have told her that I had my own way of doing things, and that because this was my house along with Lee's, my house, my rules. But at the time, I thought that since I had only been married for a short time, I should not make any problems for fear of destroying something precious after such a short time. And along with that, I made another discovery that was not good news for me. I also noticed Lee's attitude towards what I believed was a genuine problem. He almost always turned a blind eye to his mother's unfairness toward me. I once asked him for help. "Can't you do something about your mother, Lee?" His reply made me think that I would rather he turn a damn blind eye than say something ridiculous like that.
Why can't you just listen to Mom when you know she's going out of her way to give you advice so kindly? You're my wife, and it's only obvious that when it comes to a wife's word against a mother's, the latter always prevails.
I was so dumbfounded that I couldn't find the words to reply. After that, whenever Lee opened his mouth, he just kept on stating in different ways using morally harassing words, that Whitney's word was absolute in the house as long as she was there. In the meantime, he quit his job and started his own business based on the know-how he had acquired through his old job. This had been his dream for a long time, so I did my best to help him start his own business. Running his own business was not an easy task, not by a long shot. And for the first year, the unstable income put pressure on the family budget. However, after months of work and continued resilience, hope, his efforts paid off, and the business got off the ground. Right about when this story escalated, Lee's salary had doubled that of when he was working for his old office. A few months after he got his new company off the ground, I found out I was pregnant. When I told my husband about this, he was very happy. And Whitney was too. "I'm going to be a grandmother. I can't wait to see my first grandchild," my mother-in-law said, jumping and swaying her arms joyfully. After we found out I was pregnant, Lee became much nicer to me than ever before, and he even helped with the housework himself, telling me to take it easy, to rest whenever I didn't feel well, etc., etc., etc. Whitney also frequently brought baby items and gave them to me as gifts. I was relieved that I would no longer have to deal with her harassment and my husband's selfishness in taking mommy's side. But that happiness didn't last long. When I was in my 5th month of pregnancy, I found out the sex of the baby from an ultrasound taken at a medical checkup. And as soon as I walked in through the front door, I reported it to my husband. "Hey, honey, I have some news. I know the sex of our beautiful child."
Ah, about time. Well, come on. Tell me we're getting a son.
Actually, we're having a daughter, Lee.
What? Why?
What do you mean, why? I mean, why not? Of course. It's a girl because it's not like I can work magic and make it a boy.
Why not a boy, though? I can't let a stupid daughter inherit my business if she's gonna go marry a man. I don't want the damn thing if it's not a freaking boy.
I was absolutely appalled. How can you say that? Doesn't matter what sex the child is. Then Lee raised his eyebrows at me as if I was crazy.
And what are you talking about? A woman becoming my heir? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in a damn while. That's for sure. A man who goes out, works hard, and makes enough money to support his wife and children is a much better asset to the family.
I just stood there, dumbfounded, at all the heartless comments emanating from my actual husband's mouth. He used to be such a sweet, kind, charming man. What kind of warthog-faced swamp monster was I talking to here? I didn't know a lot of things right then, but one was certain. This was not the man that I'd hoped to spend the rest of my life with. I had no idea that he felt that way about sexes and children. At that moment, I was so angry that my body shook. To make matters worse, it seemed that my mother-in-law had heard about the news that very same day because she called me out of the blue.
"What are you trying to accomplish giving birth to a daughter? You realize Lee's company is going strong, and you want to interfere with that by letting this thing into the world? Unacceptable."
Whitney also spoke harshly about the fact my baby turned out to be a girl. I was stunned by her words and was disgusted by the two traders' insistence on a male heir and their refusal to be happy that the baby was a girl. I began to feel stressed about it and made it of paramount importance that I keep my distance from Lee and his traitorous mother so as not to influence the baby in a negative way. However, I had not yet decided on a name for the child, so I decided to ask Lee for any suggestions. "What should we name our daughter, Lee?" When I asked him this, he answered in a tedious manner.
I don't freaking care. Why don't you do whatever you freaking want? Since you seem to want to bear the bitch, you name the stupid thing.
How dare you?
What does it matter what her name is, eh? She's still gonna be a freaking girl. It's none of my damn business.
Tears welled up in my eyes as I heard those soul-piercing words. My chest tightened and I ran out of the room crying. I promised myself that I would never talk to him about her again. From then on, Lee and I talked less and less. Even so, he never stopped blurting out his sarcastic aspersions towards me.
I can't have any good chemistry with that stupid excuse of an executive, for real. I was thinking of making my son my right-hand man someday, but if you hadn't decided to bear a daughter, we wouldn't be worried about the future of the company right now, would we? You're just adding unnecessary worries to my frickin' busy schedule. You're a stay-at-home mom, but instead of supporting my work, you're getting in my way. I don't know what you're enjoying.
Lee said in a voice too loud for a soliloquy. I just pretended to not hear him and let him get on with his ridiculous ranting. Then, Whitney even said something even more unbelievable, directly to my face.
"Just freaking forget the girl. Have a boy already. If it's not a boy, what's the point of having any children, Danny?"
Every time she saw me at home, she was like this. The moment she laid her eyes on me, she was reminded of the somehow scandalous decision of bearing the child anyway, despite her being a daughter instead of a son, and she would go on to insist that I bear a boy as soon as possible. To insist on a male lineage nowadays is quite an anachronism for anyone, let alone parents with a grandchild on the way. I couldn't and I wouldn't answer. Yes, I understand to that bitch. I kept giving vague answers, and each time I saw Whitney, I felt more and more disgusted with her. I managed to keep my spirits up by complaining about them both in my child-rearing diary, which I started keeping after I got pregnant. As I endured these days, I finally gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. When I held her in my hands for the first time, I felt happiness that was impossible to be put to words. I named my beautiful daughter Aurora, after my wishes for her to have the brightest, most wonderful life the world has to offer. After leaving the hospital, a party was held in my parents-in-law house to celebrate the birth of my baby girl. It seemed that it was Whitney who had come up with the idea. When I heard about it from Lee, I smiled and said, despite all those hurtful things she said, she's still so happy to have her first grandchild, isn't she? Lee must have been pleased inside too, for he agreed to the idea. I was so happy to hold my own child in my arms that I strangely thought of the two traitors in such an optimistic way. On the day of the party, we were invited to my parents-in-law's house with our baby Aurora. When I opened the door to the living room, a sumptuous meal was laid out on the dining table. This is lovely. Thank you so much.
You guys are the stars of the show today. We got a delivery from a famous restaurant.
It looks amazing. Bon appetit. While my father-in-law were having a friendly conversation, Whitney was still looking at me with an expression of anger and resentment. I decided not to pay her any attention and instead enjoyed the delicious food and took many pictures of my lovely Aurora in her grandfather's arms. It was a peaceful and happy time, and it was as though all the hard days I had spent so far were a lie. When we were about to bring the party to a close with our bellies full, Lee announced,
I have something for Danny.
Oh? What is it? He went to the other room and came back with something hidden behind his back. I was so surprised and happy by how sudden the announcement was, along with what Lee's actions here implied.
Here you go.
And he put a pretty paper bag on the table. What is this? Is it okay for us to open it?
Oh, it's just a little congratulations present for Aurora.
He pushed the paper bag on the table toward me. Oh, wow. The wrapping's so cute. Thank you, Lee, so much. To get a present from my husband, who hated the idea of having a daughter so much, this was certainly something unexpected and wonderful. I knew my baby would be adorable in his eyes when he saw her. I was glad he changed his mind about Aurora. I cried with relief and joy. I looked inside the paper bag and saw a chic and stylish black box with a beautiful white ribbon wrapped around it. Lovely! And immediately, I excitedly opened the box. And that's when everything plunged into darkness. What the hell is this? The moment I saw what was inside the box, I instantly felt the blood rush away from my face, and my heart began to pound. I quickly closed the box, marched into the kitchen with trembling hands, and threw the whole present in the trash, box and all. Admittedly, this behavior of mine could be construed inappropriate in the eyes of onlookers, but that box held the most despicable message anyone could have ever written. Leo, my father-in-law, who was watching from across the table, jumped to his feet startled and said,
What are you doing? You can't throw away my son's present.
Lee bought that present for Danny, didn't he?
My mother-in-law, who was standing next to me, followed suit with her husband.
That's right. What a thing to do. You're disgusting.
Meanwhile, my husband was staring at me with the most evil grin I'd ever seen on his face. I tried to keep my voice down. Mr. Spencer, please have a look at what's inside. At my words, my concerned father-in-law picked up the little black box from the trash, eyed it for some time, and then opened it up. Then he gasped, and his face turned bright red with fury.
What in the name of mighty behemoth is this?
What did the black box contain, you ask? Well, it was filled with flowers, but not just any flower. Pure, white chrysanthemums. If you don't know, chrysanthemums are considered the flowers of the dead in many cultures around the world. The fact that Lee stuffed a whole lot of flowers into the confines of such a small box goes without saying that he could have been expressing intent of killing his daughter. Contrary to my pale, aghast face, Leo's face turned bright red, and he yelled at Lee.
What the hell do you think you're doing? What does it look like? It's a present that expresses how I feel about the frickin' baby.
Lee said without a trace of an apology.
You know what chrysanthemums are used for, don't you? Of course. I'm sending it to Danny with that in mind. I wanted a son. I have no use for a daughter. She's as good as dead, in my book, and that's why I gave her those flowers.
He said flatly. Leo's fist went flying, and Lee was knocked to the ground.
What the hell, Dad? What was that for? That's my freaking line, you gosh damn son of a bitch. You have no idea what this means to me.
Leo raised his fist to my husband's face again and again, and it was as though he had gone insane. Whitney, who was watching him in horror, finally snapped back in reality and said,
Leo, honey, stop this. Stop this at once. Don't you dare lay a hand on him.
Whitney, you shut the frick up!
Then, at that moment, she said words that made it seem like time had stopped.
I'm sure Lee picked out the perfect present for Danny and her stupid insect.
At that moment, Leo's fist suddenly froze. 1 second seemed to last a whole year, and in the air in the room had become extremely frigid. Then he turned to glare at her, stood up, strode over to her, and slapped her, silently and deadly.
Leo, what? Oh my God, you hit me!
He muttered under his breath, his voice dangerously quiet.
You've gone mad, you swine.
Soon after, my daughter started to cry because of the whole commotion. I looked at Lee and Whitney, and all my emotions exploded. I can't take it anymore. I was a fool to think that you had changed your ways after the birth of our child. I can't tell you how much the two of you tormented me during my pregnancy with your ridiculous insults. Why the frick does it have to be a boy? How can you treat such a precious life so disrespectfully? I can no longer be family with you two psychopathic miscreants. I'm divorcing you, Lee. The temperature dropped even more, if that was even possible. My daughter's crying echoed throughout the house. I tried my best to soothe her.
Don't be freaking stupid. What the hell do you think you're talking about? You're a woman, damn it. Even if you divorce me, you won't be able to live on your own.
That's right. You were born to be a housewife, and now you're going against Lee?
The atrocious buffoons didn't care about Aurora's crying and continued to yell at me. Then Leo, who was biting his lip and trying desperately to hold back tears of embarrassment and shame, slammed on the table so hard that both Lee and his mother screamed.
Shut the hell up, or I swear, I will make you shut the hell up. Don't even think about saying anything more that will hurt these two. And, by the way, Whitney, we're done. Danny's completely right. You two are psychopathic miscreants, and I refuse to be family with you pieces of shit. You, Lee, are no son of mine.
Whitney's shoulders slumped at her husband's words.
You little bitch! You...
Leo restrained Lee, who was about to go ballistic with rage. A new strength seemed to have befallen my father-in-law. Lee could do nothing but squirm under his arm, and with both arms around his neck, his breathing became raspy breaths of desperation too.
Now, Danny, you must go. We'll discuss the divorce thoroughly later on.
Yes, Mr. Spencer. Thank you so much. He nodded. Goodbye, everyone. I promise you I won't let Aurora see you again. I ran out of the house with my daughter in my arms. I made my way home, quickly packed only my personal valuables, and made my way to the station, where I got on a train bound for my parents' neighborhood. Later, Leo came to my parents' house with all the divorce documents and apologized to me. My husband's section was already filled out on the papers, and all I had to do was fill them out and submit them. He then told me that I could ask for alimony and child support as well, so I heeded his words and hired a lawyer. I asked for alimony and child support from Lee. The diary I'd kept during my pregnancy was found to be sufficient evidence of moral harassment. Leo also divorced his own wife, just as he declared that afternoon. Having been kicked out of her house and having no place to stay, Whitney went to the apartment where my husband and I used to live and pressured Lee to let her live with him. Leo disowned his son, and he has no one to ask for help in paying alimony. And financially, it seems to be very difficult times for him. He now works for his own company during the day and works part-time as a traffic warden at night. He also started working as a day laborer at a factory on weekends. But a few days ago, his overwork reached its peak, and he collapsed at his day job at his own company and is currently in the hospital. As for Whitney, she is busy working part-time as a janitor and taking care of her son at the same time. On the other hand, I am now able to raise my daughter with the help of my own parents. The smiling face of my beautiful daughter, who is growing little by little every day, supports me and fills me with happiness. I will always protect your smile, darling, and I'll do everything I can to make sure that you live that wonderful life you have ahead of you. I say as I feed my daughter her milk, staring deeply into her twinkling eyes.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. "Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them." It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. "Meetings should be for employees only." Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, what's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1, if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. "Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay?" I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. "Yes, I'm inviting my father." "That's great. I might invite my parents too." I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.